In this video, I want to show you how to write a really good opening paragraph for a chapter or a section of your work or an essay by looking at a prize-winning historical narrative by Richard Hofstadter. It's such a really well-written book. I think we can learn a lot from Hofstadter's work. So I take an example from chapter 5 in The Age of Reform and look at the opening paragraph of that chapter to see what we can learn from the way Hofstadter constructs his opening paragraph. So let's look at the first sentence. So from 1860 to 1910, so it's this one here I'm looking at. So, hang on, if I can just show you that one there. There you go, that's better, a bit more accurate. So from 1860 to 1910, towns and cities sprouted up with a miraculous rapidity all over the United States. So we've got scene setting. We've got a period of time, 1860 to 1910, a 50-year period we're talking about. Towns and cities sprouted up with rapidity all over the US. So very general but short opening statement. So it really grounds the rest of the paragraph and in fact the chapter. It tells us immediately what it's about. We don't have to work hard, we don't have to think about it, we're not puzzled. We know exactly what to expect from this chapter. So the first sentence is going from it's very general, very broad, and from that we're going to move into the more particular, or at least Hofstadter moves into the more particular, and as we progress we get more and more detail. So first sentence is broad, general, tells the reader exactly what this chapter is about, and lays the groundwork. It puts the stall out, if you want, for want of a better way of putting it. So that's the first sentence. So let's look at the second one. Large cities grew into great metropolises, small towns grew into large cities, and the new towns sprang into existence on vacant land. So we've moved from the very short, general first statement into giving a little bit more detail. So now we're talking about what happened to cities, what happened to small towns, and what happened to vacant land. So we've moved from the very general to the slightly more particular. So let's look at the third sentence, which is this one. While the rural population almost doubled during this half century, the urban population multiplied almost 7 times. So now we're getting into much more detail. We're talking about the difference between the rural population and the urban population, and then we're talking about numbers. And this goes more into the next sentence as well. If you'll see, places with more than 50,000 inhabitants increased from 16 to 109. Larger cities of the Middle West grew wildly. Chicago more than doubled. So you can see how we're going into more and more detail. We're giving a few examples of what we're talking about. We're not just leaving it vague in general. We're actually looking at some of the specific numbers and what happened to specific key cities such as Chicago. Twin cities trebled their populations, and others like Detroit, Milwaukee, Columbus and Cleveland increased from 60 to 80%. Sorry, it's a bit cut off down there. So you can see in this opening paragraph how Hofstadter starts with a really general and informative but very broad brush sentence, and in each subsequent sentence he adds more and more detail. The only thing that's slightly different is this sentence here. I can show you here. The larger cities of the Middle West grew wildly. That is another quite general sentence, and you could call that a conjunctive sentence. So in a way, the paragraph has 2 halves. It's the first half, which is talking about very, very general, then a bit of detail, another quite general about the Middle West, though. The larger cities of the Middle West grew wildly. Well, that's quite a general statement. And then giving some examples. Well, Chicago doubled and others trebled, like Detroit and Milwaukee. So this is a really excellent opening paragraph because it captures your interest. It doesn't leave you in any doubt what the chapter is about, but it also gives you some key information so that you're already beginning to get the information that you want. And it's written I think in a very straightforward, readable style. There's no jargon. There's no it's not flowery. It's really quite straightforward to understand. So I think this is an excellent opening paragraph with some really good principles that we can follow. So in summary, the first sentence sets the scene of the paragraph, so it is general and broad. The first paragraph sets the scene of the chapter or the section that you're writing for your dissertation or your thesis. You move from the general in sentence 1 to the particular in sentences 2 and 3 by adding a small amount of detail. The last sentence of the paragraph sums up the paragraph, and ideally it links to the next paragraph as well. And sometimes paragraphs have sort of two halves where they look at an issue from two slightly different perspectives, and they often need a conjunctive sentence in the middle to join the two halves together, even though the whole paragraph is on the same topic. And in this case, the conjunctive sentence will also be general. For more free training on academic writing, go to www.lynnbrierleyjones.com.